First of all, Bahrain is complicated, but I'd say unnecessarily so because the political divide inside the country, obviously between the opposition and the government and the respective constituencies, but also this divide that we're seeing also here in Washington. So folks who are observing Bahrain who have just frankly opposing views and arguments about what's happening inside the country. Each camp is, and this was really not the case early on in the uprising, each camp now seems to be totally dismissive of the other's point of view. I think really it's unnecessary because both narratives, which is that the country really is in desperate need for reform, and that Iran is actually engaged in destabilizing acts in the kingdom through local allies, are both true. I mean, these are not mutually exclusive theories. But the problem is, as I mentioned, due to the failure of the previous rounds of dialogue from 2011 to 2014, and the total lack of trust today, frankly, and the punitive measures by the government against the opposition, all of that has created a stalemate and an environment where those two theories now are seen as totally dismissive of each other. I mean, any casual reading of the history would suggest that if Iran had its wishes, frankly, it would have annexed Bahrain a long time ago. This is pre-1979, even pre-Shah Iran. Those are really old ambitions that the Iranians have had in Bahrain. They've always considered the country as sort of a 14th province. And there's no disputing the fact that with 1979, those ambitions have become much stronger, and they've always seen the country as just an extension of Iranian territory. Well, first of all, because frankly, it's not that extensive. I mean, I'm sitting here in Washington, it's easy for me to say that, but for the authorities in Bahrain, obviously, it's a very serious security concern, and it fluctuates every now and then. Sometimes it's really high-value targets, terrorism targeting, government interests and personnel. There's always this attempt by the Iranians to foment some kind of an insurgency against the government. They've failed miserably, in my point of view, at doing that. But if I were to really characterize the activities that the Iranians have been involved in, I think they range from radicalizing Bahraini Shiite youth to operations linked somehow one way or another to the IRGC against, as I mentioned, government interests. And then there's this really complicated process of radicalization, basically, that they're involved in with the help of their local allies, and primarily, frankly, radical members in the opposition. That's a great question. I mean, if annexation is not really a realistic contingency, any direct form is not of control is not a realistic contingency, obviously, because the repercussions will be quite severe. So what are they actually looking to do, and what are the really realistic expectations? I mean, I'd say it's, if they can manage to try to turn Bahrain into sort of a satellite state that is extremely sensitive to their national security interests, right, and that is looking more like what they have inside Iran, which is a theocratic system, right, modeled after the Islamic Revolution, then that's a huge success. But those ambitions, I still say, are quite lofty. So I'd say what's more realistic is that if they can as close as possible to what they have in Lebanon, where they have a really powerful, militarily autonomous ally that can sort of control the strategic levers of the state, then that's a major win. But they're far away from doing that. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But inflating the threat is one thing, but it runs the risk also of dismissing the very compelling evidence of Iranian destabilizing activities, really. I mean, I've visited Bahrain several times over the past 3 years, and I've had extensive engagements with the officials, and I've seen with my own eyes actually the evidence that has been displayed in front of me in terms of what kind of weaponry has been used, what were the plans that have been foiled, and the attacks that have been foiled, and all that sort of stuff. So it's very much real. Now, of course, the interpretation now is where it becomes very problematic, and it's been used as an excuse to, as you very well mentioned, delay or push back on some of the reforms that they are less comfortable doing. most question, I mean, the most, I'd say, powerful antidote, and I've mentioned in several of my writings on Bahrain, the most powerful antidote to that type of interference will always be, and it's the most sustainable strategic answer, is a more aggressive implementation of the reforms. Of course, pair it with a still serious devotion and diligence when it comes to counterterrorism, right? So the two go hand in hand, but there is no substitute really for legitimate and meaningful reforms that would address the concerns of the population, absolutely.